Pro wrestling is an ever-evolving industry, with encyclopedias being updated, documentaries being released, and relationships mended or destroyed. The attitudes and narratives of wrestling superstars begin to change. Individuals like the Ultimate Warrior, Bruno Sammartino, and others are brought back into prominence, while the history of some of the other bright characters are being washed away or changed. Some are pigeonholed and being remembered for that one event or that one specific moment in time. Others become as insignificant as a crossword answer. My job as PWP's resident historian is to remind you of the impact that these individuals and teams left on the industry. This is PW Profiles. Rocky Johnson, Ron Simmons, The Rock, Kofi Kingston. All of them are credited with breaking down barriers of racial inequality, segregation, and biases within the sports entertainment realm. But as with all things, there must be a first. And the first man who really was credited with breaking down these barriers was none other than Bobo Brazil. Now, before I begin, as I mentioned that, and every Black History Month, WWE shows commercials and advertisements for those wrestlers, those moments that broke the glass ceiling. Do you really remember seeing a lot of, if any, Bobo Brazil in those commercials?
In the commercials, no. Even if it was, you probably wouldn't even recognize him. It's like a quick, transition. But I do know that he was a part of a Black History Month special back on the network when I first launched. But it was literally the only time I can think of, and that was 8 years ago now. 9 years ago.
And it's kind of sad because Bobo was one of those that, if you remember the stories, it would definitely. But if you remember the stories, Vince McMahon Sr. had people that he wanted Vince Jr. to watch, take care of. And it seemed Bobo was one of those men. Because I remember early 2000s, they released a magazine, the top 50 WWE superstars. Bobo Brazil was in that.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think if they were to do that now, he would be on it. And it's a shame because, he sold out arenas like Cobo Hall at a time when he was banned from going to restaurants, hotels, and even certain territories due to the color of his skin. Bobo Brazil had many great matches with the likes of Killer Kowalski, Ace Calhoun, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. He had a couple babyface versus babyface matches with Bruno Sammartino. The feud was with The Sheik, which is where these Cobo Hall matches happened. It was for big-time wrestling. It was there in the Detroit territory that he became a 9-time United States Heavyweight Champion and a 8-time World Tag Team Champion. Which you figure, at a time when NWA had seemingly hundreds of territories, the U.S. and the Tag Championship of the territory was looked at as important as the NWA heavyweight title because being the U.S. and Tag Champion, you were in the territory. You weren't traveling.
Right.
So you were the main draw. His finishing move was a headbutt, the Coco Butt. Probably the largest thing that happened in his career was in 1962. He defeated NWA champion Nature Boy Buddy Rogers by hitting him in the groin. This caused Rogers to be unable to continue. But being the babyface that Bobo was, he refused the championship and they met a couple of weeks later and Rogers won. Now, could you imagine Twitter was around at that time?
Who booked this crap?
Yeah, why? Why would you have my man Bobo win just to have him lose?
50-50 booking. I hate it.
This was large though, because you figure Bobo went over on Buddy Rogers, who was the big draw at the time. And I mean, 62, you were still having all these racial issues throughout America. So to have, to have a black man, an African American on top was seemingly unheard of, especially in a fighting sport, to where this would depict a black man beating up a white man, which even in film was taboo. So I couldn't imagine how people, especially at this time where wrestling was seen as real, how they responded to this.
I could probably tell you it was probably wasn't very good.
No,
because you hear like Jim Cornette stories about even like in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah,
when they had like black wrestlers like being heels, you had people threatening to kill them just because of the color of their skin. So, if back when Bobo Brazil was big during that time, before JFK, I don't know.
And another big moment for him was in 1970. He and El Mongol defeated Mr. Ito and the Great Ota in what was the first racially mixed match in Atlanta history. Think about that. It took until 1970.
Damn.
And Atlanta, Georgia, was a hotbed for wrestling. Once he eventually retired, he served as a mentor to not only the Soul Man, Rocky Johnson, but to boxer Smokin' Joe Frazier, who was the first boxer to beat Muhammad Ali. So you have all these important moments, and Bobo was an influence on him. His last official match was in 1993. So you figure he went from 48 to 93. He actually ended his career facing the son of a former rival of his. In 94, he was inducted by Ernie Ladd into the WWE Hall of Fame, which again shows how important he was to the McMahons, because those early days of the Hall of Fame, it was kind of a thank you. It was to the Andres, the Moolahs, the Captain Lou's. So for Bobo to be included, that just showed the impact that he had on wrestling as a whole. And I would be remiss with all of his racial, the glass ceiling breaking, along with doing a lot of it in our backyard, to not include Bobo Brazil as a PW profile.